Running. So, welcome everyone. I want to take the time today to have a look at the longer term roadmap. We previously looked at the short, medium term roadmap, which I define as out to 2 years. So, for now, to the next 2 years, and you can review the results of that session on YouTube, or there's a transcript or summary on the Product Council Slack channel. Today, I want to look at the longer term. And to be frank, there are only two real issues. Sorry, I have no idea what's gone on here. There we are. Can you see my screen now? Can you see that presentation?
Nope. Nope.
No?
You
No?
have stopped sharing, according to my Zoom.
Oh, for goodness sake. Come on, Zoom, wake up. Where's it gone? I'd like to say how well this is going, but can't. Excuse me a second. It again. Looks to me like a clash between apps on my laptop. So that should have fixed it, I hope. You see it now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see.
All right. Yep. Okay, so there's only two broad subjects, but I want to dive into some detail on them. And I also want to have a bit of a call to action on these. So please bear with me. So the first one is about machine readable regulation, which is actually something that's progressed a lot further than people generally realize. There are three broad developments directly from regulators, because our regulators obviously have a vested interest in this subject. The first is the European Commission, which has developed a machine readable and executable reporting framework, which they call somewhat unimaginatively MRER. And so that they had a proof of concept, and now they're looking to encourage adoption by regulators of the MRER definition. In parallel, the Bank of England have had a work stream going for quite some time on digital regulatory reporting. They now have developed an operating model, and the purpose of this is to effectively automate the process of compliance reporting, where they define what needs to be reported and the format in which it is reported, and there is a mechanism for direct delivery of reports from banks, payment systems, etc. And BIS have had two projects, Ellipse and Mandala, where they built a prototype for machine-driven supervisory reporting. This is something that they view as an interim step. It's a pathway towards large-scale machine executable reporting. So the two complementary projects worked from opposite sides of the problem. Ellipse is focused on the regulator, so this is a supervisory, and the Project Mandala focuses on the transactions. So the idea is that they want to make compliance native to payments, so it becomes part of the payments pipeline. From the academic direction, there is so complementary action. So Cambridge University has what they call their regulatory genome project, which created an open information structure. The important point about this was that it was focused on building taxonomies which align with these international regulatory standards, and it is designed for use by regulators. And in parallel, the academics want to use it for research. The Reg Genome is actually a commercial company. They built the prototype for Project Mandala, And they have also worked with the RGP project. In fact, I think they're out of the RGP project um, by applying these taxonomies to real regulatory documents. And this, I think, is possibly the most relevant to us at the moment. So they've been working to convert regulation into structured machine readable data. So they've gone from the PDFs, which define regulation in many cases, to machine readable data, which can be um, uh, incorporated into, in particular, payments pipelines. And the idea is that it's all about supporting the evolution of MRER and its adoption within not just the regulatory community, but within the financial sector, the regulated, in other words. There are a number of similar developments within the financial sector itself. So ISDA, which is insurance sector, they have a digital regulatory reporting model, which encodes reporting logic once, the idea that it can be used across multiple regimes. The point, the strengths of this particular approach is that it's testable and executable. Although it was originally built for derivatives, the model is relevant to payments. Um, they're very keen to extend their model outside of their own sector and into the payments model through the use of ISO 222, because as they claim, it provides a shared vocabulary, so their work can be extended into other domains. You'll notice the use of the phrase common domain model. James, did I hear you intervening?
No, apologies, Paul.
It's okay.
I
All
was
right.
typing.
The UK is also establishing some foundations for digital regulation. There is unbelievably a regulatory innovation office. Who knew? Which funds the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, which is across four regulators: data protection, competition, communications and media, and financial services. The idea being to create a unified digital regulatory library. But so again, it's all about authoritative machine readable rules. So then they enact existing rules. They're not creating their own rules. They're enacting existing rules from all of these participating regulatory authorities. The aim is, of course, to make regulation computable, but not automatic. So future developers will be able to discover, reference, and call rules via API. And I actually believe that that's live, at least in proof of concept. You can access the rules via an API that the RIO has published. So far as I can tell, this is just my perception based on what my reading, that the payments sector has not yet adopted machine readable rule books. But we know that real world exemplars now exist: the EU MRER, the Bank of England's DRR, the Reg Genome project, and the ISDA's work. And the idea is that these reduce the gap between PDF rulebooks and executable rulebooks. In other words, it's taking away interpretation of rules and just making them directly machine executable. And in my view, we as an industry should now begin considering how to refine architectures to support machine readable regulation, supervision and regulation, because it's coming whether we like it or not. And we do need to have an agreed approach on this. I'm not saying now, but in the next 2 to 5 years, this is going to become an important issue for us. Yes, the banks, the financial sector generally is beginning to adopt MRER for the regulatory reporting, and attention is starting to shift to switches that interconnect them. And I would imagine that, for example, Swift is going to have to start thinking about this. So we will now need to ensure links to supervisory authorities' rule repositories via the aforementioned APIs. automated regulatory reporting mechanisms, again, to these supervisory authorities, and processes for the ongoing validation of MRER linkages. In other words, are we getting the actual correct machine readable regulation, which is obviously a security issue. So what are our strategic requirements? Well, we need to develop the capability to source these rules from supervisory authorities during deployment and updates, and at regular intervals after that, to check that it's up to date. We need to integrate these MRER checks into transaction flows, or at least build a strategy around this. Build an operator-facing dashboard showing the regulatory reports and the compliance status, and collaborate with leaders in this space to build a robust strategy for adopters. So we need probably a limited scope proof of concept, like I say, not now, but sometime in the foreseeable future. Taking a step back. And also, I think that the very first thing we need to do around this is to build a working group out of the community where we can start to define the community's approach to machine readable regulation. So this is a summary of all the steps that are needed within the Mojaloop community. Notice I don't view this starting in the very near future in terms of actual functions. If you remember from last week, 2 weeks ago, the green lines are thinking and the blue lines are doing. And I don't view the doing as starting before probably mid-2027. But we do need to start collaborating with the thought leaders like now. We've already had contacts with Reg Genome in the past, thanks to Julie. And we need to deepen those contacts and start thinking, start using that to build an MRER strategy for Mojaloop adopters. Only after that will we actually start thinking about how we implement it. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, so again, I said this was long term, and this I don't think that we'll actually have live probably before 2030. Before I move on to the next subject, does anyone have any comments on this?
Presumably, the main question for us will be that most of this regulation will fall on participants.
Yep, it will. However, we know from comments that are being made by the European Commission and from the BIS that it's going to start stepping into the switch space as well.
No, I'm not saying it won't, but what I'm saying is that it seems to me that it's likely that most of the complexity of this, from our point of view, will be managing the interaction between the switch and the participants in terms of machine readable regulation, which will be aimed squarely at the participants.
Yep, and I agree with you on that, Michael, completely. It's balancing the stress on the participants versus what we need to do in order to support them on this. Claire, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Paul, for the overview. I think it's very on the point for forward looking. If I look at the evolution within our own community of identifiers, because identifiers are necessary, of course, for any digital reporting and consistency across borders. If you look at the way the global system for the LEI has evolved, it started out with a regulatory oversight committee dedicated only to the legal entity identifier. And then roughly 3 years ago, that was changed to a regulatory oversight committee for identifiers in capital markets. So now inclusive of product identifier and of transaction identifier. And if you look at kind of like the waves of regulation and then themes, often you do have a starting point in capital markets because it's fewer participants and sometimes higher risk. And then lessons learned there go into other types of financial transactions, especially payments. So I think this focus in long term is really spot on, because you could say like the wave starts in the capital markets, like you already identified with ISDA.
Yeah.
But of course, this will then extend into payments as the next type of financial transaction. So I think it's very on the point for the long-term product focus.
Okay, thank you, Claire. But yes, I think you're right. It starts off in the capital markets and spread out from there. They have the initial pressure on them from the regulatory community, and the rest of us have to follow, unfortunately.
And it's not fast. I mean, the ground changes slowly, but you see indeed the longer term roadmaps of the regulatory community then going into payments, ISO 20022 harmonization. So it's slow moving, but indeed, I think the roadmap that you highlight here is also then in alignment with the expectation for speed of change.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's the case. Unfortunately, somebody's just turned up in the Teams link. I can't do anything about it. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I propose to move on now to the second part of this presentation, if that's okay, unless anyone else has any comments. Nope. Okay. Right. Well, you'll be entirely unshocked to know that I wanted to talk about AI in the payment space. So yeah, in the payment space, at least, or in the finance sector, there's lots of interest, but not a great deal to show yet. In fact, when I was reviewing these following slides yesterday, I was thinking that my thinking that is that is reflected in this deck actually comes from about 4 or 5 months ago, and things have moved on from then. I think things are moving a little more quickly. In contrast to the machine readable regulation, I think we might have to bring this forward from my initial sense, because I think things are maturing rather more quickly than I expected. So broadly saying, we are seeing increased collaboration. We know that MAS in Singapore and the UK's FCA have announced a partnership for to look at AI in finance, and we've also seen significant growth in the use of agentic AIs. So AIs acting as an agent of a legal or natural person, acting autonomously towards goals defined by that person, according to the strict definition. There is a potential to evolve Mojaloop into a self-managing ecosystem with agents operating within defined governance boundaries. But it's not going to be straightforward to do that. One of the things that we've seen, or we were seeing, over the last 6 months, a year, was agentic AIs suffering significantly from hallucinations, which were causing them to misbehave in apparently unpredictable ways, and that's something that we would have to manage. So there are 3, I think, increasingly well-defined mechanisms for managing the hallucinations. So equipping the agents with access to tools for factual operations. So rather than relying on the AI developing its own tools to access APIs, whatever, give them direct access, or tools develop APIs for determining when liquidity levels are out of an expected range, etc. So essentially put safeguards around their operation, and use what's called retrieval augmented generation to provide the grounding documents. So the agent always has to cite and work from these operations manuals, so that it's easier to detect when they're starting to veer off into some imaginary world of their own, and use stop level control to force intermediate reasoning to be externalized and observable. In other words, an operator can check its workings on a regular basis. And then there are other potential uses of AI around participant onboarding. Make the onboarding process a lot more straightforward. Having said that, there's a lot of work that's already gone on the participations work stream, which should also actually make it much easier to do that in any case. But there's also the opportunity to use an agentic AI for real-time monitoring of participant positions and liquidity to allow the forecasting of NDC breaches or liquidity shortfalls using historical patterns. So remove liquidity as a human managed constraint and enable preemptive action by the scheme operator. So use the AI to inform, not to actually carry out the preemptive action. In terms of technical operations, the AI acts as a continuous operations assistant, maintains situational awareness of hub health and performance, and detects anomalies early and alerts operators. So for business continuity, this is an area where I think we're seeing increasing use of AI in the financial sector. So monitoring logs, API metrics, and transaction patterns, and seeing where something is going wrong, and potentially triggering activation of alternate site, or perhaps actually just triggering the development of additional instances of particular processes. Compliance and governance. This is where there's an overlap with machine readable regulation. So an AI can then evaluate DFSP and hub behavior at the API level and simulate the effect of proposed regulatory changes on an operational scheme, enhancing regulatory readiness and supporting transparent governance. And it strengthens our alignment between operational behavior and regulatory obligations. And it supports that simulation of rule changes. So if you change the settlement windows, if you make changes to NDCs, model the impact on liquidity requirements to enable evidence-based governance. So it's difficult at this moment to say what the strategy should be, but its potential importance suggests action. We need to start thinking about this, develop a working group to really define the Mojaloop community's approach to AI-based operation of a Mojaloop hub, rather than just a watching brief. Also, machine readable QA frameworks. We actually have a work stream focused on exactly this at the moment, developing the machine readable QA framework rather than the AI which uses it. So an AI approach to this would enable the evaluation of new Mojaloop deployments automatically, generating reports and risk assessments for the harbor operator, reducing a manual QA effort and improving deployment confidence. And it supports safe, rapid iteration of scheme upgrades. In actual fact, about 3 weeks ago, I attended a seminar on and exactly this. There is an AI project, an open source AI project for quality assurance using machine readable QA frameworks. And I think that we as a group should establish our own working group and decide whether we should start contributing to that initiative. It seems entirely relevant, particularly as it comes out of the FINOS project. AI and DFSPs, near-time operational use, I think it's limited, but perhaps there is long-term potential. Essentially moving it to what am I trying to say here? We can actually use it to forecast liquidity requirements for DFSPs. So a DFSP could extend the AI use beyond the Mojaloop operations and into their own operations, which would allow them to optimize liquidity across multiple channels. Because I think we sometimes forget that a DFSP often needs to manage their liquidity across multiple operations. Mojaloop is not the only channel that they use. And also by embracing machine readable regulation, an AI could monitor compliance at the payment manager level, and it could extend the governance and oversight model seen in hub level AI operation into the DFSP domain. So some recommendations around this. Form a working group to explore the opportunities for differentiation and long-term cost reduction for adopters and hub operators around the integration of agentic AI into the Mojaloop hub. Focus on liquidity and settlement management operations and deployment QA at this early stage. Caution is needed. We've seen the issues arising some of the early applications of agentic AIs, the minor disasters at AWS and Meta have been salutary lessons for us all to exercise a little caution there. We should also seek partners, particularly in the academic world, in order to develop an initial approach. And a working group should evaluate the potential for the application of AI to the adoption of machine-readable regulation. As I said, my thinking has evolved somewhat since I developed these slides about 4 or 5 months ago. So as I think AI has moved rather more quickly than many of us anticipated. And so again, we have the green lines, which is the thinking, seek academic partners to help us to refine strategy, and also develop a strategy for management of agentic AI through a working group formed from within the Mojaloop community. At the top, this is the only one that I think that we're going to actually enact now as a technical work stream, the machine readable QA framework. The work on this has actually begun. The KPMG team who developed our QA framework were very keen to develop it further into a machine readable format, and they have committed to making the first steps in that within the current PI. So we'll have something to review as an initial first step by July this year. Actual further work on that, integrating AI into the Mojaloop hub, I really didn't think that was going to begin until early 2028. But recent developments have made me think that maybe we should be more optimistic and move it forward perhaps into 2027. But again, it depends on demand amongst Mojaloop adopters. I think that's all I want to say for the moment. Perhaps I could pass that over to questions now. And also volunteers for participation in a working group on this. I notice a distinct lack of volunteers.
I'm happy to be part of a working group, Paul.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Julie's volunteered as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to assist
Me
with
too.
the QA assessment side of things.
Yeah, sorry, what did you say, Sam? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'd like to be part of the QA assessment side of things.
Yeah. And Michael, of course, Sam, I would very strongly invite you to be involved in that. And Michael, that's outrageous. Did you write this bit yourself?
Is it a
how dare you?
Only often.
Okay, thank you all. I will put out a general call for people who are willing to contribute to the working group on AI adoption and a separate working group on machine readable and executable regulation. These are 2 areas which I think are going to become increasingly important. I think probably the nearer term is going to be the AI work. Machine readable regulation is a little further out, but possibly not far.
I would like to volunteer to be a another of the skeptics on the AI discussion.
Well, skepticism is really important on this,
Mhm.
I think. And optimism is going to cause us potentially untold problems. Duncan, you have your hand up, please.
Yes. Maybe just to comment on something, and I think which is very important is in terms of the AI working groups. So I believe like what works here in Kenya is that we have a lot of communities that we from the campus or from the education level, also from the industry level, we can try to push that up. And I really support the AI working group. So if there's any initiative around that, I'm ready to support and also rally the community, the tech community here in Kenya, just also to support that. Thank you.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you, Duncan. I very much welcome your comments. So thank you. Does anyone else have any comments? No? Okay, good. So I will put out a more formal call for participants in working groups on the Product Council Slack channel, and we'll start to schedule meetings of those working groups in the very near future. So thank you all. On that note, thank you all, and thanks for your contributions today, and speak to you again soon.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.